Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Hazel Leonard, and I'm going to be hosting this session today on navigating relationships after loss. It's such a huge topic that um, really does need addressing because the relationships with people around you, the relationship with your partner, your husband, but not just that, it's family and it's friends as well. And these are integral when we're navigating loss, that the right support is in place and how to navigate those relationships, how they're going to change, and what we can do to support with that. So, a brief introduction about myself. I said my name's Hazel. I'm a midwife and a fertility educator. So I support people from conception throughout pregnancy, birth, and in the postnatal period. Obviously, loss can happen at any stage. There's no limit to a miscarriage, a chemical pregnancy, stillbirth. Um, Loss can happen at any time, and we're here as this wonderful community to support people with that. So that's a little bit about me. If you wouldn't mind, if you could introduce yourself and just share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do. I'll
Cool.
start with
Let me go
Karina because
first.
she's the first. Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
Samana, you start.
No, Karina, go ahead. Go ahead. I go. Yeah. Um, so my name is Karina. I'm from the UK originally. I've been in Dubai for 9 years now, and I'm a personal identity coach. In terms of my own experiences with loss, I have unfortunately suffered two losses of my own. I experienced one miscarriage, which I'm very certain about. I knew that I was pregnant, and it was quite early on. I was 9 weeks pregnant when I suffered a loss. Um, it was obviously a very devastating experience in every way, but it was quite devastating from the hospital experience that I had as well, just in terms of the whole management of the process. And then I say that one was a definite loss because the second time was actually, I think, probably a chemical pregnancy, because I very much noticed every single change in my body that I had noticed before. And I think I was about 2 weeks late for my period. And I'm so like clockwork, always on time. But unfortunately, I then came on my period. It was a very heavy period, and even more painful than usual. So sort of everything kind of added up to that, really.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah, I think that chemical pregnancies as well, it's important that you've touched on that because they can often be disregarded as they don't
Mm,
count. But you've had either like a faint positive test or something's changed and you know your body very well. And it's still very difficult to go through. So yeah, thank you
yeah,
for sharing that.
you're welcome.
Simona, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hi, I'm Samana. Been in Dubai for almost 2 years now. I think in 5 days I hit 2 years in Dubai. I'm originally from India, born and raised there. Uh, so I've had two losses. My first was in 2022, where it was a loss at 7 weeks. I had a missed miscarriage. So, no indication that anything was going wrong, and walked into for the heartbeat test, and then there wasn't a heartbeat. And quite similar to what Karina said, I felt similarly with the hospital experience, just very isolating because no one's in the room when they find this out, and you're all by yourself. They only let my partner in after confirming that there was something wrong. So then, usual first pregnancy, high statistics of this happening. Don't worry, the next time everything will be okay. You hear that from everybody. We moved to Dubai. I work in advertising here. So almost exactly a year ago, actually, we found out we're pregnant again. And I think when you've had a loss the first time, the second time you're wary about feeling excited about it. That was something that I was talking to Hazel about when we spoke. Uh, you don't allow yourself to feel happy. You don't allow yourself to look forward to it. So in this case, once we crossed 7 weeks, we heard a heartbeat. We were like, okay, things are going good now. We'll continue. Uh, Went on till about 12 weeks. Things were still good. Did the NIPT, found out we were having a boy. So I think, everything was slowly sinking in. And then we went in for the anomaly scan, and turns out the baby had hydrocephalus, which is enlargement of something in the brain which causes fluid retention. So again, I'm lying on the table and the doctor's asking me, have you had the NIPT? And, at that point, I'm just like, oh, he's probably excited to tell me I'm having a boy. So I'm like, oh, I know I'm having a boy, I know this. But then he's just like, okay, can we just get your partner in? And something's not okay. So my husband comes in and all over again, basically. In this case, we went back to India for a second opinion. And we also had the choice to terminate if we were in India. So we flew back to India. We met with doctors, we met with the clinics, and I think the only thing they told us is the only thing you can do right at this point is to terminate the pregnancy because it was really bad. So we had no choice but to do this. So at termination at 19 weeks, I opted for labor and delivery form of termination because they said, we don't want to unnecessarily pressure your body into surgery if we can avoid it. So we did that. Thankfully, it was just about a day, so we were able to get through it, but I did what I had to do. We had a chance to see our baby, and yeah, that was it. And it's been 6 months, 7 months since this happened. I don't think the trauma is going away anytime soon.
No, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I know how painful, and I can hear it in your voice. Like it's such a difficult thing to go through, and especially when you have to make that decision to terminate a much loved baby. That's your little boy, that's your son, and it's not an easy decision to make. And like you say, it's been 6 months. 6 months is still a very short space of time. So it's, as I'm sure you're going through the process. But again, thank you for sharing that with us. Dr. Rose, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Thank you, Hazel, and thank you, Karina and Sumana, for sharing your experiences. I think it's such a valuable thing that you can hear other people's experiences, and it makes it more relatable. So thank you. So my name is Dr. Rose Lobban. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been in the Middle East for nearly 15 years. And probably in the last 5 or 6 years, the majority of my work clinically has focused on perinatal mental health, including loss, fertility, kind of as aspects of my practice. So I do a lot of work pre and postnatally, and including obviously with loss and infertility as well.
Thank you very much. So, well, look, I know you've been doing this event for like a couple of years. I always see your name come up. I've never been on a panel with you, so I am really pleased to have you here and to hear your advice and your take on things. So firstly, I'd like to speak to Sumana. Just how did your experience of miscarriage and termination for medical reasons, how did that impact your relationship with your partner initially? Did it impact your communication? Like what's happened in the last 6 months?
I think from my first experience, what I did learn, which luckily helped us the second time around, was making my peace that we are not healing at the same rate. Our recovery is at a different pace from each other. My partner's been great. He's been part of every appointment with me. He's not someone who's like, your parents will take care. He's been through the whole thing with me. I think he's the only person I want in the room when something happens. But I think acknowledging that this is a very different lived experience for both of us is something that took a while because, I took more time off from work. So, my recovery was slightly different. But then again, it's happening to my body. So then the way I see it is very different from the way he sees it. I think the hard parts was being able to deal with that dichotomy of, two people healing in different ways. And I think the way we cope is also very different. Like the grief manifested differently for me and it manifests differently for him. So, while I'm becoming more anxious and hyper aware of everything going on around me, my husband has insane brain fog. So then, he has to be constantly reminded of things that have to be done or, oh, we had to do this, oh, we had to do that. And, it's hard. It's really hard because you want to do things a certain way and then someone's struggling with their grief a certain way. I would say the only thing that's helped us so far has been to have conversations about it. We're both in therapy. We're both in therapy. We've been in therapy for more than a year now. So that was helpful with respect to our therapists hopping in when all of this happened. And just constantly having conversations, like talking about how we feel, talking about, if I'm missing the baby, telling him that, and not just getting angry about something or crying in a corner, but actually saying, hey, I'm reacting to this because I feel this way. And I think just it's a work in progress. I wouldn't say that, oh my God, everything's 100% amazing. I think it's a constant work in progress. It's a lot of work. I really believe these are one of those life incidents that either bring a couple closer or you end up drifting apart a little bit. And I think it takes a lot of work, which sometimes feels tiring because you're already going through a lot physically and mentally, but it takes work for you to work on your relationship and make sure that you constantly talk about what's going on. So for us, the one thing that's worked for us has been talking about it. We talk about it a lot. We spend a lot of time together. We go on walks. We talk about how we're feeling. I'd say we try to be mindful of how the other person is feeling. I wouldn't say it always happens all the time, but talking about it, and I think being aware or okay with the idea that we're two separate people on these two journeys has been what's helped us or helped me deal with this, basically.
Thank you, Shen. I think that's actually a really valid point, is that everybody grieves differently. So nobody on a path of grief is going to experience it in the same way. And the fact that you guys have acknowledged that is a really big step. And I'm sure Dr. Rose would agree. This is definitely her area of expertise, but acknowledging these things is really important.
I think, Sumana, you said beautifully. Sorry, I was going to say, I think you just said it so beautifully, that there's often such a big dichotomy, isn't there, that you see your partner, sometimes able to do things before you feel ready to do it, and then also acknowledging that they perhaps feel a bit guilty about that as well, and the fact that you're able to talk about and share those conversations, I think, is just so important.
I'm just going to come to Karina. Obviously, your experience of loss has been slightly different, but what I wanted to focus on is you're an identity coach. So when we're talking about relationships and we look at relationships with other people, obviously loss can impact almost a bit of our relationship with ourselves, which then in turn can impact how we engage with those around us. Is that something that you found, and how did it impact the kind of relationship with people around you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, in terms of, so at the time, this happened quite some years ago as well. So possibly, how many years ago now? So 4 years ago. So it was before I actually became a personal identity coach. And now I can look back and actually see just how much I changed. And immediately from, day dot of finding out that I was pregnant, from the moment that I had a positive pregnancy test, I think you assume suddenly the role of a mum. And I very much felt like a mum from that moment. And I think it's very difficult to then convey that, because so I was very open about being pregnant, even though I knew the statistics and, in first trimester and things like that, because I just am a very open person in general. So I was very open about being pregnant. And so when I experienced my loss, I was very open about that too. But actually, it was one of the things that I found really, really challenging, was genuinely talking about my feelings, because there was a part of me, I guess, that felt cheated. I'd stepped into this kind of mum responsibility, and I started thinking about things very, very differently. I started treating my body differently. I started to think about the future differently. And my husband and I were naturally, having all of the conversations that you do when you first find out, because you're excited and you're talking gender, you're talking names and all these kinds of things. And I found that really, really difficult to actually vocalize how I was feeling. So even though I spoke about my loss to people, I probably didn't talk about my feelings of, where's my mum role gone? Where's that part of my identity that's now gone? And that, obviously that was the first experience. And then it was even harder with the chemical pregnancy, because not actually many people then knew about that, really. So yeah, I think that was really challenging. If I look at how I changed as a person, and if I relate that to my relationships as well. And I think, yeah, I think everybody wants to help you, but nobody really knows what to say as well, understandably, obviously, unless you've experienced it. And then when you're unable to communicate your own feelings as you want to as well, I think, you know, that's where the not friction can lie, but you know, that's where it can be challenging, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you draw on a really valid point there when we're talking about sharing it with other people. We might tell people this has happened to me, but we don't necessarily say, I'm really struggling today because this has happened to me. We don't necessarily open
Yeah.
up with people of, we might, you know, say the what, but we don't say how we're feeling. And that, yeah, that has a big impact. And if somebody reacts in, you know, because we do hear these things, annoyingly, and me and Samana were talking about this, when people say, oh, at least you found out early, or at least this happened, or you
Yeah.
know, at least, or well, at least you can get pregnant, so you know you can just do it again. And that can impact your relationship with that person, because you can feel that that kind of negativity, or that, and that person's probably saying it from a point of ignorance and they don't know what to say, but it still hurts, and then that plays a part on your relationship. Dr. Rose, how can people, what kind of interventions and what techniques can people use when they're working on relationships after loss? How can somebody that's experienced a loss kind of navigate those dynamics of those relationships?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I guess we would all like there to be a solution to, you know, kind of a magic wand solution really in these situations, and there isn't. You know, grief is a natural kind of human experience that we really have to navigate. So I think the question for me really relates to, how do we support people as they navigate whatever their grief is like for them, whatever grief means to them. And some people come to grief when it relates to loss with previous experience of loss and grief, and perhaps they have more understanding, or they have more knowledge, or they've done more reading. So I think the first thing for me is what I would call psychoeducation around grief. What is normal? What do we expect? What might happen? And being really clear, like Samana said earlier, that there isn't a one size fits all, but here's this enormous array of things that you may experience as part of your grief. So I think that education piece and that awareness piece is super important at the start, when your inclination is really to kind of try and fix grief. And I think that's where you get some of those maybe well-intentioned but quite unhelpful comments from people. So that's where I would start. And then really, I think it is supporting people, making sure that they have access to therapy if that's relevant for them. Other supports from a mental health perspective might be medication if it's indicated. Not everybody will want to take that option, or it may not be indicated for everybody either, but it could be a conversation. Supports other than that might be somebody like yourself or Lala, the Love Through Loss community. Peer support can be really valuable. Having people who have the same or similar lived experiences to you, that you can comfortably just say how you feel, and not have to worry about what they're going to think, or how they're going to respond, or what they're going to react to. And then it sounds a little bit simplistic, to be honest, but asking people to just be mindful of how they take care of themselves more generally. You staying hydrated, eating well, getting some gentle exercise, reaching out to maybe even spiritual connections that they might otherwise have moved away from. So then there's the kind of more general lifestyle interventions that we might recommend as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, it is like you say, it's not one size fits all, and something that might support one person, another person actually doesn't find it's for them. You know, it's not really their thing, and they need kind of a different level of support. And kind of coming back to that conversation, Samara, about the family and the friends. When you were kind of going through your experience, did you find it quite easy to talk to your family and friends, or was it something that you found extremely challenging? Like, how was it navigating those relationships?
I feel like I was a bit like what Karina said she was. I was very vocal about it. I messaged my friends. I'm like, here, guys, this is what's happening. People were incredibly supportive. But I think it takes a toll on all your relationships. If I could say, I think a life event like this really affects all your relationships, good and bad, of course. Like for example, my sister flew down from the US the minute this happened to me. And I never imagined I could call her for this. Like I remember getting on a video call and I'm thinking to myself, she has a family of her own, so will she be able to come? And I don't want to ask. And the only thing she says is, okay, so when do you need me to come? And she books her tickets and she's with me over there. My parents were great. My parents were really supportive. My in-laws were really supportive. I think close family came together. It was interesting because I saw my parents lay down boundaries for the first time in their lives. Like they told people not to come home, which was huge. We come from a standard Indian family where, these things are not said. And so for my mom and my dad to tell people that, hey, we don't want people to come home right now. They need their space, they're grieving, was huge. So I think one was watching people do that because that really cemented relationships in a way that I've never seen it before. Friends were great. Honestly, I think, like Karina said, some of these things are lived experiences. No one really gets it until you've been through it. So what was helpful for me was people who did two things. Either people who tried to understand and sort of stepped in with trying to understand better, or people who came and said, you know what, I'm not going to say that. I don't know what to say. Like, this is just horrible and I don't know what to say. But here, I'm here for you. I was in India for 8 weeks. I had my best friends all around me. They would take me out when I wanted to go out. They would we'd go for a meal, we'd go for a movie. And I think when you feel that lonely, that's what you need. And they would understand when I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm tapped out. I just want to watch TV in my room and not leave the house right now. And I think people who understand that, people who are mindful of that, that was really evident in the relationships that I had with some people. I have to recall this one story. I have a friend who there were about 3 other friends who were pregnant around the same time I was, which made it harder. And then one of them who thankfully delivered had a baby boy. I met her a few weeks back and she pulled me aside and she was like, hey, if you're feeling triggered at any point of time, please tell me. Are you okay? Like, are you fine? If you need to leave, that's okay. If you don't want to show up for an event, that's okay. And that was the first person to say that to me. So I think it's been helpful for people who've been trying to learn how to do this. And you know what? We don't know. Nobody knows. But the other side is it's not so hard to find out. I really think it's not so hard to do some reading and try to say, how do I talk to my friend who just lost a baby? What do I say to her? What are the right things to say? What are the wrong things to say? And for me, at the point 6 months down, I know who's done the homework and who's not done the homework. It's almost been this light into my head on my life as to here are the relationships that really matter to me. I'm able to focus energy on those. It's been great with respect to learning how to set boundaries with everybody, myself. I've never been good. I've been a people pleaser my entire life. And then all suddenly I'm someone who sets boundaries and I'm like, hey, this is what works for me. And, it takes a village. I think they talk about how it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to grieve as well. Like you said, there are times when I'm drowning and I need help right now. And someone just swoops in and they help me out. It's either it could be my partner, it could be my sister, could be family, could be friends. There are days when I just message my friends and I send them a really long text message and I'm just ranting and raving and talking about what's going on. And I don't have to tell them I'm doing this because I'm grieving. I just need to tell them I'm having a bad day. And this is why I'm having a bad day and this is what's happening. And these are people who just step in to hold you when you're falling. And I think that's what it's been like for the most part.
I love that you've had that experience of the support network and that your friend is, it's a great example of somebody being really mindful of, she had a baby, but she's aware that could be really triggering for you. And has laid that out of, if you're finding it too much, that's fine. I'm still here for you. Take your time. And people, I mean, in some ways that's the best they can possibly do to help support you, isn't it? And Karina, did you kind of find a similar dynamic with the people around you? How did they react when you told them? Were people quite supportive, or were people a bit dismissive?
Definitely people were supportive. I can't, yeah, I was very fortunate. I can't really think of anyone who was outright dismissive. I think the only thing I would say is that, you know, I think some people were sort of better at trying to get me to feel what was going on, which is probably what I needed. And I think even though I was very open because I wanted to share my experience because, you know, I wanted to take away the taboo nature of miscarriage. And actually, I even posted on my socials because I wanted to generate that kind of awareness. But I think, yeah, when it came to speaking to my friends and speaking about how I really felt, I did actually really struggle, as I said before, you know, with some of the feelings around, you know, becoming a mum and experiencing that loss. And I think the one thing that my friends wanted to do was obviously to make me feel better. So a lot of my friends would actually be, you know, the people like you say that say, well, at least you can get pregnant now and it's going to happen again, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, and not really actually feeling the real kind of raw emotion, which actually then later, much later, came out because I'd been suppressing it. And like with anything, eventually these things tend to catch up with us. And it meant that also, even I guess with my husband as well, like even though we would speak about it a little bit, I did really struggle to be honest with him about my feelings because I didn't want to get upset about it. And I was really trying hard to put such a brave face on it. And, you know, we are going to get pregnant again and everything's going to be fine. And, you know, so it's, yeah, I think everybody was supportive, but I think it's just appreciating that a majority of your friends do want to kind of pick you up and make you feel better. Sometimes you actually need the friends that are going to say, look, if you just want to talk about anything, if you just want to let it all out, if you just want to sit here in silence with me, whatever it is you need, you know, these are the real kind of quality conversations, I guess.
Yeah, and it's great that you kind of drawn attention to, you held it in for a while, because I think that, like we talked about grief being a individual process, but you didn't deal with that straight away, and you kind of held on to it for a longer time, and then when it did come out, you could look back reflectively and say, well, you know, this is where I was. And then that kind of brings me to you, Dr. Rose. What advice, let's say somebody's watching this and they're, maybe it's a husband and he doesn't know how to support his wife, or it's a mother, like a grandmother or a friend, and they're not sure what to do or what to say. What kind of advice do you give to the, you know, we have like this circle of grief. What do you give to people on the outside of that, you know, or they're not right in the center of the grief, but they're kind of a bit more on the outside?
Ask is the first thing I would say. You know, you might not know exactly what you need, but if somebody asks you, you at least can, you know, you can share what you think might be helpful or what you do need if you do know. So I think the first thing is ask. I think too often people are scared to approach grief, to approach the people who are grieving for fear of upsetting them. And I think both Karina and Sumana have talked about people kind of wanting them to feel better in their grief. And somehow there's this myth that if I ask you about your grief, I'm going to make you feel worse. And I just want you to kind of get over it and move on, and then everybody will feel better. So I think don't be scared to ask the person who's experienced loss what would be helpful. You know, do you want to just sit at home and make popcorn and watch a movie, or would you like to go for a walk, or would you want to talk about it? Do you want to look at photographs? If you've got photographs of your baby, maybe you want to share those photographs, and people haven't asked, and people haven't asked their name even. So I think don't be scared of grief. Ask and check in. Like, is this okay if I ask you about this? I want to know how to help you. I want to know how to support you. There are resources out there that people can go to if they don't quite feel comfortable to ask. There are websites and resources that you can look for, and they can be helpful in also supporting family members or friends with how to approach grief as well.
Yeah. And also another point, a very dear friend of mine had a loss at 35 weeks. And, you know, I sent her a message this morning. It's 5 years later. I sent her a message this morning to say, you know, I'm thinking of you today because I know today is always symbolic. She lost her daughter in August, but it's also today's quite symbolic of baby loss as well. And remembering the babies, remembering their names, you know, not forgetting. Maybe it could be, you know, any stage of loss, but it happened in this month, and I know this month every year is going to be a difficult time for that person, and just kind of checking in with them, you know, not just, oh, okay, it happened a couple of months ago, we don't need to talk about it anymore. It, you know, you know, people don't want to forget. You know, very often
I think you touched on a
their grief.
Really important point, Hazel, that often we want to kind of hurry people through grief. And I just think that when you're grieving yourself, most people will say, I don't want to kind of rush through this. Of course, I'd like to feel other things as well, but I don't want to rush away from this grief because it represents a person that I've lost. And perhaps an identity and a role, like Karina was saying, you know, kind of so many different facets to that loss. But we don't need to rush people through it.
Definitely not. And this question is kind of for Simona and Karina. If you could maybe go back to yourself as this was happening, or in the weeks or the months after your losses, what would you kind of say to yourself? You know, what would you say to somebody else that's maybe going through this or navigating this now, and how to navigate the relationships with those people around them?
I think one thing I would say to myself is that the fog will lift. It feels like the fog never lifted in the beginning. You know, you're just like, what is this grief? I mean, when does this get better? And I think one thing that I would like to say to myself, and I do say to people on, you know, Reddit threads and stuff like that, is that the fog does lift. And to someone else who's going through this, I think just be kind to yourself. That's the only thing that counts at this point. You know, just be really gentle. Whatever it is that you need physically or mentally, whatever it is, right? I think we're so pressured to be a certain way societally that when something like this happens, it is trauma, and we kind of forget that it's trauma. I remember justifying to myself about something, saying, oh, but you know, this person is postpartum 4 months. And then my husband looks at me and he's like, you're postpartum too. And I think we forget to be kind to ourselves. We forget that our bodies have been through this massive experience. Our minds have been through this massive experience. We've lost a child. I don't think it gets worse than that. And yeah, the only thing I would say is just to be kind to yourself and give it the time it needs. And, you know, like we've been speaking, there's no one method for anybody. There's no guarantee that what works for Karina works for me, works for you, works for Dr. Rose. So to just be patient and be kind to ourselves, that's the only thing that works.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. Just being kind to yourself completely. I think, you know, looking back on my personal experience, I put way too much pressure on myself to be okay. And I think, you know, I probably needed to sit with the grief a little bit more and experience the grief. Even though I was being open, it wasn't actually being open and honest. And, you know, just giving myself that kind of time to appreciate what I've actually been through. And I think, I mean, I think in terms of relationships, I think the other thing as well is kind of deciding what you need, you know. And, you know, Simona, you also said earlier about, you know, sometimes you would need to talk and other times you would need that kind of solitude and that kind of space. And I think if you can decide what you need, and you can almost set some kind of, not ground rules, that sounds very official, but you know what I mean? You understand the people that you can be really open with, and you've got your probably a small pool of people that you can be open with, but know who they are, know when you can go to them. And then everyone else, you can kind of say, look, I've gone through this experience. This is what I don't want to talk about, and this is what I do want to talk about, or I don't want to talk about anything at all, because you know that group of people in particular mean well, but they can't really handle it, you know. So I think just understanding what you need, and then you can start to manage people around you as well.
Can I just chime in here? Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
One more thing I wanted to add was For me, my biggest realization was realizing that not everybody needed to hear my truth. I think realizing that I did not have to be vulnerable to everybody was a huge realization, which really helped my relationships. I don't share unless I feel safe to. And again, coming from someone who's a classic people pleaser, I love oversharing. This is the first time I've taken a step back and I've said, you know what, I don't want to share because I don't feel comfortable sharing, or, I don't think this person deserves my vulnerability, has been very helpful in managing my relationships, because not everybody needs to know everything. And that really helped my relationships too. Sorry, I just wanted to add that, and I missed saying that.
No,
earlier.
thank you so much. And just Dr. Rose, if you could maybe share people navigating this journey from going forward, what are some kind of tips you would give for their relationships in kind of navigating that?
I mean, I think both Karina and Sumana have made some really amazing kind of suggestions and raised some really good points. And I think when it comes to any relationship under any circumstance, communication is always the top priority. And I think also knowing when your partner or your husband or even your mum or can't be the right person sometimes. I think, Sumana, you were saying like you recognize that some friends are kind of, the dynamic is such that you wouldn't maybe go to them for certain things and you would go to somebody else for something. So I think it's communication, but it's also knowing who are the people that you feel safe with, who can respond to you, and I think advocating for your needs in your relationship, especially because we said so clearly that people do tend to go through grief differently. Their pace might be different, their experience might be wildly different, and so being able to advocate for yourself and also listening to your husband or your partner or your family member and hearing what they need as well. So I think communication is massive, but it's not just as simple as talking about it. It's being really mindful about what those conversations might look like, and when they might not actually be with your husband, they might be with somebody else. I think the other thing is to ask for the help that you need, and I guess that follows the same thread as advocating for your needs and what's going to work for you. Don't hold back and wait. Ask for help, explore what help's available, and ask people to signpost things and what worked for them and what helped them. And Karina, you saying to begin with, you just felt like you had to be so strong and you had to be okay. I think if you had somebody there saying that you don't have to be okay, it's all right. And you could have felt that you could have gone to people, maybe sat in that grief a little sooner. Not that it was right or wrong to go at your own pace, but yeah, asking for help if you feel you need to is definitely important.
No, thank you so much for that, and thank you all for your time today. It's been lovely to speak with you and for sharing all your experiences and your advice.
Thanks, Hazel. Thanks,
Thank
Dr. Rose.
you.
And thanks, Karina.
Thank you.